Welcome to another podcast, guys. Today, I have some very, very important information to discuss with you as basically a summary of the about was it nearly a week that I spent in Norway. I was invited by a very good friend of mine of as of many years. We have been working together in Africa, mainly helping impact the African nations, bring them technology and business developments that could help benefit their needs, the things that they're lacking, the things that they keep bringing up as problems in their countries, if it be pollution, if it be electricity, if it be what have you, just any ways that they could improve um, their their nation's ability to output good technologies that would benefit their societies in agriculture, in city planning, you name it. I mean, it's just many different areas where we've been involved in many years with this organization called Africa Israel Initiative. And so, my good friend Erik Selle, who is also the head of one of the Christian parties in Norway, he invited me and arranged for meetings, speaking engagements, podcasts, where I could basically share my experience of the war that I have been involved with here in Israel and in the ground operations in Gaza. So I said, let's do it. Now's the time. I have a window of opportunity because, again, things are constantly developing here with our enemies. It's not something that we can just schedule in and say, this is when I'm going to go to the war. This is why I can be free for speaking engagements. And so, um, thankfully, Eric and I were able to really make it happen. I was able to make it. He was the one that did all the arrangements and everything. And it was such a really impactful trip for me because it also reminded me um, a lot of what my family and I left when we left Scandinavia. We used to live and have a home. We had a beautiful home in Sweden. We had a beautiful home, a family property that we all shared amongst our family, and it was something that we wanted to keep as an inheritance within the family. That any one of our family members could travel to Sweden and use this beautiful farm that we had um, as a place to go for vacationing and make memories. So we actually ended up living on this farm for about 5 years, and the sad reality is that we noticed that things were getting very uncomfortable for Jews in Sweden. I was able to see the type of people, the type of immigrants that were being allowed into the country, the type of violence that they were introducing, people that had been fighting in the civil war in Syria, had blood on their hands, had committed horrible atrocities, were given Swedish residence, and or these were Swedes who were radical Muslims that went and joined the war and then came back. They went and fought with ISIS and then came back with their Swedish passports and so on. So I had some conversations with some really uh, very smart people, people that work with the highest levels of intelligence in the government of Sweden. And I asked them, I said, what's the deal? Why this reality? And the simple answer that they gave me is simply that this is what the politicians want. They don't want us to do our job and to essentially go after these terrorists. So, for political reasons, you had your intelligence community being given a stand down order and to just allow things to go as if problems are just going to go away. And so this is part of the ignorance of a lot of the politicians that I have witnessed, their sentiments, their worldview, that it's this humanistic worldview that everybody is the same, everybody has a conscience, everybody just wants good. And it's just the circumstances that we find ourselves in that lead us into either becoming a terrorist or involved in a war or whatever. It's not that we're bad people. It's not that there is such a thing as bad people, we're all good. And this is a very deceitful worldview, and it leads to a lot of incompetence by law enforcement, which is being led by political agendas that are just sideways, to put it plainly. So, any case, my first experience as flying into Norway was um, getting on the fast train out of the Oslo airport into inland into Norway, and heading towards my destination where I was going to meet up with my good friend, and we were going to get set up and start our meetings. So my first introduction, welcome to Norway, was on the train. You had a digital display of advertisements that would just circulate, and on there you had some news reels, highlights of news that were being reported. And then you had what I counted was three different organizations, three different NGOs that were raising funds for displaced and hungering and suffering Gazans in Gaza because of the war with Israel. And the picture that each one kind of gave was, again, a very skewed picture of reality, of just showing a bunch of kids in rubble or whatever, and that this is their reality. So please, dig deep into your pockets and please give to this organization, because apparently the Gazans aren't getting aid, they're not getting help, they're just deprived, and it's just horrible and sad, and let's do something about it. First of all, let me just start with this thing that I noticed, that I saw. Nobody's questioning in Norway, except for some few, but the majority are swallowing this idea that the Gazans are suffering, that they're having a hard time, and that we're privileged here in Norway. We have our wealth, we have our cozy lives, and in order to kind of, how to say, to justify my good living, I need to do something about this, right? Not necessarily because they understand the conflict, not because they really care about Arabs in the Middle East. Let's be real, because if they really cared, then I think we would see a much stronger outcry when there have been millions, and I mean millions, of Muslims slaughtered by each other in the civil war that I just mentioned, that took place in Syria, um, and then I mean, just conflict after conflict in North Africa, um, the Congo. The list goes on. I mean, there's been millions of people affected globally because of these extremists. And if we really cared about the suffering of people in the world in general, but in specific, if it were our care for the Muslim population of the world, then it shouldn't start and finish with the Gazans or the Palestinians living within Israel. It should actually start where they have been oppressed and found themselves in the middle of war, and all these other countries where there is no public interest, there is no media coverage, and people really are not getting their help. They're really not getting uh, um, um, relieved from these wars that are taking place. So, first of all, that was the first thing I was introduced to, was these three advertisements mixed into there. In addition, they also were reporting on the beeper attack, the I guess, I don't know if you call it a cyber attack or whatever you want to call it, towards these electrical devices that the Hezbollah operatives in Lebanon were using, and the Israeli intelligence community had apparently had targeted these devices with explosives, and basically simultaneously blew up thousands of these devices, causing terror and havoc within the Hezbollah leadership and operatives. So Israel hasn't openly claimed responsibility, but I think many of us are aware of who else could it be, what and of course the answer to that you're not going to find, not from me, because I am not privy to that information, and even if I was, um, it's not something I'd be sharing publicly, since I imagine the whole point of this operation was for the public and also the enemy of Israel not to be aware of the capabilities and contacts and who exactly was involved, etc. Um, the point is that when you're involved with terror and when you try to terrorize others, beware that you'll be, that you are also going to be targeted and terrorized. And I think that was a very, very refreshing tactic, whoever was behind it. And I'm very grateful for the thousands of these terrorist thugs that have been hit with a very strong blow. And I hope that this sends a clear message to those terrorists: just stop. And if that message wasn't clear enough, then I'm sure, at least when it comes to the IDF, we will make our message very clear of don't mess with Israel. Because I can tell you that if Hezbollah chooses to go to war with Israel, which, based on what we have seen as of now, um, they clearly want to go to war with Israel. They are targeting our civilian populations here in Israel. Heavy, 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 heavy rocket fire and drones. They're being sent in, these attack drones, and so on. And so, what I would like to say is this: we are prepared to do what it takes to secure our borders and to fight the enemy wherever they may come from. And so, Hamas, if you are still hell bent on trying to destroy us and to eliminate us and to eradicate us from this region, think again, because that's not going to happen. So I continued my travels in Norway, and again, it was just becoming more and more uncomfortable, more and more eerie, and just seeing all of this terrorist propaganda on the streets. I went to the main university of Oslo in Norway, where they have a tent, like a tent facility, or what do you call it, like these tent town whatever encampments in front, right there on the campus, and then decorating the buildings with the Pride flag and the LGBTQ flag, just to make sure they covered all their bases, in addition to the Palestinian flag, and then slogans like "Free Palestine from the river to the sea," and so on. When I arrived there, there wasn't anything violent when I had witnessed that. So there wasn't anything violent, or any extreme action that you saw from the people manning these positions. What you saw was just people that were just there. But if you read the slogans and you read the propaganda that they're promoting, and having the kafia, the checkered kafia that they were wearing themselves, and then also selling to, hey, support the cause, buy kafia, wear it. Here's a Palestinian flag, spread it. Here's some stickers, spread it in town and all that, right? So basically, useful idiots is the way I could describe them, because there's nothing more moronic and ignorant than holding up the pro homosexual movement flags and the all the other in betweens, like I said, the LGBTQ, whatever. Um, there's nothing more ignorant than holding these flags together with the Palestinian flag, which represents anything and everything but tolerance for homosexuals and or whatever you want to call yourself. They do not tolerate that kind of stuff. In fact, what these ignoramuses seem to not understand is that if they found themselves in Gaza or in a Palestinian town waving these flags together with the Palestinian flag, they would find themselves tossed off the highest building and or tortured to death and or drug on the back of a motorcycle as a protest to anyone to think that this is tolerable actions and promoting of these kind of ideals. This is what we're going to do to you. That, and the message would be very clear to anybody else who would attempt to do something as stupid. But nonetheless, there they are, front and center, with these flags, with these slogans being married into each other as if they're one and the same, and they couldn't be any further from the truth. Um, so I witnessed that, and it was just embarrassing for them, for me to watch them being so ignorant and doing that. And you think, okay, so what's the harm, right? These are just harmless people. They're not attacking people. They're not being aggressive in any way, right? Well, then you start to look a little bit further and just open your eyes and let the landscape speak to you what the propaganda is achieving. Then downtown Oslo, in the central city of Norway, okay, this is the capital city of Norway, Oslo. In Oslo, I then saw stickers and posters, basically saying that Zionism equals Nazism. And one of the stickers that I'd seen was a flag of Israel, and that the Star of David in the center of it was converted into a swastika, like mixed swastika Star of David graphic, and you get the message. Seeing something like this in a nation that has been marred by the history of the Holocaust and its involvement with the Nazis, who basically used Norway as a beachhead to carry out their invasion of the known world at the time, um, it's not really encouraging. It's not encouraging at all. It's not, I mean, to me, if you know that your history, okay, has, um, a stain of this of this anti-Semitism. Not by choosing, by the way, just to be clear. It's not that the Norwegians were Nazis. Um, the Norwegians simply were fighting for their survival, and was it the SS unit of the Norwegians, were specifically positioned and posted in the war against Russia and the Russian invasion. So their concern was self-preservation and survival, and I get it. So they're not Nazis, historically speaking. It's not in their ideology per se. But the fact is that they would claim, people on the streets would claim that Israel is a Nazi nation, that the safe haven of Jews in the world is a Nazi safe haven. I mean, think about that for a minute. Just the contradictions in these people's uh, um, observations of reality is simply what I found to conclude insane. These people belong in an insane asylum. These people who are promoting these agendas and these ideas and trying to make them work, right? LGBTQ and free Islamic extremism, and we go hand in hand. No, you don't. Okay? Jews are Nazis. No, we're not. I mean, how stupid can you be? How blind can you be? Well, apparently very blind and very ignorant, because this isn't just the sentiment of some individuals in Norway. We then later got to have a meeting with representatives from the Israeli embassy, and they made some very troubling observations that they shared with me, that they found troubling. So one of the things was, for example, that in March, I believe it was in March, they had a women's rights, for women march, downtown Oslo, and the Norwegian Jews and those who came from with pictures of women, Jewish women who had been who are being held in captivity and being raped and tortured by these terrorists. So they came um, with their slogans, I guess you could say, or their posters and whatnot, and signs, basically joining, trying to join for women's rights march, and say, we want to stand and recognize that these women are being mistreated right now as we speak. So this small group got attacked by extremists in the march, and basically saying, no, we can talk about rights of women all over the world, but not these women because they're Jewish women, right? Israeli women. So their rights don't count. Their rights, we don't care, right? But it's Palestinian rights that we're going to promote, and that's what we're going to protest in favor of. That's what we're going to support. Jewish women's rights? No. That's no, not allowed. So they were attacked, and when they turned to the police who were witnessing the assault, the police simply said, "Listen, you're the problem, and you're going to have to leave." Now, I understand the position of the police. Okay, I've had to work in the past with law enforcement, and I understand the way they view uh, uh, protests, marches, etc. And there's what they want to try to do is separate between the main protest and anyone who would be either protesting against or trying to get into, and but yet they don't fit the bigger crowd. So they'll usually try to separate and say, like, they don't mean, I'm hoping these police officers were not necessarily meaning that, or ignorant enough to say, no, you are the problem. But basically what they're trying to say is, and get the message to um, these Jewish women, that this isn't the place for you to protest your frustration, your hurt, your pain for Jewish women. You need to basically create your own march, right? So I kind of get that, but the fact of the matter is that the protesters, this is my problem, is that the protesters that were there protesting for women's rights and for women, that they were the ones that marginalized these women and said that their voice doesn't matter. That's the public opinion, so to speak, of the population, which is extremely troubling. The other thing that I witnessed and noticed was that they pointed out to me, the Israeli embassy, that they observed that, or observed what do you call it, where they did took some statistics, and they found out, or they took a poll, I guess it's called, and they found out that 50% of youth in Norway do not feel the freedom to openly share their opinions uh, uh, with their fellow friends. In other words, people from 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 the building blocks of your community, right? The youth of you, who are the future of your nation, they don't feel free to openly express their opinions about politics, about whatever, about Israel. That right there is something that is extremely troubling to me. And it should raise some serious questions for the Norwegians, who claim to be a free and open society, and that they're promoting democracy, when what they're really doing is that they're bullying Israel, who is the only democracy in the Middle East, and Lebanon, who used to be the number two in the Middle East for democracy and freedom of religion and rights, and we're able to have different religious groups um, express their faiths freely without the reign of terror, like the rest of the Middle East, up until Hezbollah took over and robbed them of that democracy. So you're essentially left with Israel, which is the only beam of light, a beacon of light in this darkness, and you choose to bully that. You choose to exclude us and to make us out to be the aggressors. That's absolute insanity. Again, like I pointed out, um, these people need to be institutionalized. The ones who are promoting this, because I know that the majority of people in most populations are usually not that extreme. They're not that blind. But the problem is this: if you are a Norwegian who has a thing called common sense still actively working in your mind, you're afraid to speak out. You're afraid to speak your truth the way you see and you understand, and therefore you're silenced. And the ones who are given a platform, like I said, it's the silent minority that are skewing the reality for the majority. You don't hear the other side at all. You only hear one-sided reporting, both in the media and in the political realm, because that was the next place that we went to was the parliament. We went to the parliament, met with one of the parliamentarians um, that asked me a bunch of questions. I was able to share my firsthand experience, like I said, because I've been on the ground here fighting Hamas. And he asked me all those hard questions on genocide and targeting civilians and all this stuff. And I pointed out that the reality on the ground is, just so you know, is that over 640 kilometers of terror tunnel infrastructure is under our feet everywhere we operate in Gaza, which means that the terrorists can, like a Swiss cheese, they can pop up anywhere from under your feet into civilian homes, building complexes, mosques, schools, United Nations facilities, um, you name it. Every part of society is just marred with these terror tunnels. You have terror tunnels that literally come in and out of a girl's room, and you can tell because of the toys and the decorations on in the room. Can you imagine as a little girl growing up in Gaza and having that as your reality, your norm? That's absolute insane. So I pointed that out, that you have that you have 640 kilometers of these terror tunnels in a landmass that is only 42 kilometers long. That's insane. Israel is 420 kilometers long. So, just to give people some context, these terror tunnels are the length of Israel, one and a half. That's insane. Um, what they pointed out as well to me was that the public opinion that has been propagated by the media and strengthened and assured by the political agenda is anti-Israel. They claimed that um, the Arnon operation, the operation where one of the Yamam operatives fell in battle, so the name of the operation was after this hero's name. They pointed out that that mission, which, by the way, historically is going down in the books, and that's also why I explained to the gentleman, I said, this is going down in the books as the most historic, groundbreaking, most successful hostage rescue mission in the history of hostage rescue missions, hands down. You had over 1,000 armed terrorists in the neighborhood where they were held. The hostages, the four hostages, were held in two different locations. And you had Noam Gemani. She's the young girl who is the one female, and then the three other males. In this operation, in this complex operation, with just like Swiss Army, Swiss watch time precision and efficiency, and these operatives were able to get out of there with engaging, like I said, over 1,000 armed operatives, terrorists, and they were able to get out with only one of the team leaders who was killed in the combat. And all four hostages, without a scratch, brought back to Israel safe and sound. Supernatural miracle of a mission, because there had to be divine intervention to help make this mission a success. And I know that one of the vehicles, for example, one of the vehicles that were trying to get the hostages out, got hit in the engine block, and again, by defenseless poor Palestinians, right? It's not, um, that's what the media will tell you. Again, they were heavily armed. They came under very heavy fire, and like I said, one of the vehicles got disabled, and so they had to come up with a plan B, and still were able to get out of there with over 250 terrorists eliminated, and mission success. This was reported as a massacre. That's right. This mission was reported by their media and their diplomats, their politicians, as a massacre. Insane. So basically, what I'm trying to say is real simple. What these people are doing actively in Europe is that they are empowering the terrorists. They're empowering evil. They're giving evil a voice. They're giving evil legitimacy. And they're silencing those who are willing to stand up against this evil and willing to say no thank you, like we're doing with the IDF, and posing a opposition and an armed resistance to stop this evil from spreading and destroying our societies. Since October 7th, over 100,000 Israeli civilians have fled their homes, and this is now coming up on a year, have fled their homes, have lost their jobs, lost everything that they know to be normal, and some of them have died from sicknesses and what have you, because they're not in their normal day-to-day routines and what they're used to, for those who have health risks. Personally, one of those people is a very personal connection to me, family relation, that I had to bury just a few months ago. So they're suffering, their towns and cities and homes coming under constant rocket fire for months now is okay. The attempted infiltration of the Ardoin units, these are the special forces units of Hezbollah, who attempted to enter Israel and commit the atrocities that Hamas did in infiltrating Israel from Gaza. They wanted to repeat that in the north. And if it wasn't for the IDF that would stand and to oppose them, then that's exactly what their mission was to carry out and to do in northern Israel. So this is the type of threat and reality that we found ourselves in, that we have been up against for, like I said, months leading up to a year here shortly. And the world is silent. The world doesn't say a word. Yet, when Israel finally retaliates, because Israel had to first finish its multi-front war between Gaza, Judea, Samaria, also known as the West Bank, and the north with Lebanon, we are now able to wrap up most of the operations in Gaza and then therefore allocate resources and troops and what have you to the north. And now that the IDF is finally pushing back against months of provocations, months of coming under heavy fire attack of rockets by the thousands, by the tens of thousands, by the way. Now when Israel retaliates against all of that onslaught and threat to our nation, our people, our civilians, who does the world have sympathy for? Who is the whole world talking about? As I'm sitting there trying to find a flight to get back to Israel, because my flights were being canceled one after another, and I was trying to get, again, another rebook to try to get back to Israel. I'm sitting there watching European news, Swedish news, Norwegian news, Danish news, Sky News, so England. Basically, all the European outlets were claiming that Israel had started this aggression um, against the Lebanese, starting with these devices, these explosive devices that they were using, these beepers and other radios and so on. So it started by doing this horrible attack against the terrorists. And one of these experts claimed that it was unjust because they weren't in the middle of terrorist activity when they were targeted. Wow. Sorry that they were having their dinner and we didn't wait till they finished and had their coffee before we chose to retaliate. I mean, what kind of insanity are these people trying to promote? You know, like I said, you're empowering terrorism by making these stupid opinion statements. The other thing you see is 500 civilians killed by Israeli Air Force strikes in Lebanon. What you should change in your reporting is 500 Hezbollah operatives killed and strategically targeted by the Israeli Air Force, who were firing rockets out of, yes, civilian areas, but they use the civilian areas as a as a camouflage. And many of these homes have a retractable roof where they're able to be undetected by Israeli surveillance drones, and then therefore everything seems normal at first glance until they retract the roof and then fire either an attack drone or a rocket, a ballistic missile into Israel from these civilian populations. So that's not being reported. The context isn't being reported. All that's being reported is a one sided narrative that, again, demonizes Israel, demonizes our um, attempt to defend ourselves, and and a heartless belittling and excluding of the suffering of the Israeli civilians who have been suffering for nearly a year now, either held hostage in Gaza by these terrorists and being treated in the most brutal ways, and or leaving your home, losing your job, losing your livelihood, your businesses, everything. And the world is silent. But the minute the Lebanese have to do the same because we have to retaliate, oh no, we feel so bad for them. This is so sorry. You know, play the violins. Let's sympathize with the Lebanese, which, by the way, I do. I sympathize as an Israeli with the Lebanese and I have very good relationships with Lebanese people throughout the years. And I know them to be a good neighbor. I know them to be mostly friendly. again, many of them are also because they're being propagated in their nation by, guess who's controlling the news outlets, and guess who's controlling the diplomacy? Hezbollah. So they don't know anything other than that Israel's the problem. Israel did us wrong. But like I said, the Lebanese friends of mine who have been able to look outside that propaganda and to overcome all these lies, they see that Israel isn't the problem. They see that Hezbollah is the problem, and they're sick and tired of Hezbollah hijacking their nation and destroying their beautiful country by using terrorist proxies via via their country from Iran and Qatar and Turkey and all these other nations who have these extremist totalitarian dictators who are wanting basically a jihadist apocalyptic destruction for the world. I mean, these people are insane. And instead of standing up against them and joining Israel in the fight, the West is doing the very opposite. The West is welcoming those terrorists into their countries, onto their streets, and you're essentially importing terrorism, importing terrorist sympathy, and you're fighting the only democracy that is able to stop them and prevent them here before they end up at your doorstep. So instead of joining forces with us and helping us in this fight for humanity, they're choosing the opposite. So it is crazy. It is insane. One of the things that I want to also point out, by the way, is that before October 7th, there has been a lot of activity or terrorist activity that led up to the October 7th attack. It's not that October 7th happened and all of a sudden this destruction and this suffering began because of Israel's retaliation. That's not the case. Leading up to October 7th, you ended up with nearly 2 decades of the terrorists building terror tunnels and infrastructure to connect themselves with the rest of the Middle East and with the rest of the extremists like ISIS and Al Qaeda and the Muslim Brotherhood. And so they have hundreds of tunnel systems leading under the Philadelphia corridor, which is the border between Israel and Egypt. And through these terror tunnels, they're using, they're smuggling sex slaves. Right now, there's Yazidi women that Israel's been made aware of, and basically trying to figure out, okay, how do we handle this situation, right? Because the IDF ran into this, and of course, it's creating a problem. Like, what do we do with these Yazidi women who have nothing to do with the Gazans and have literally been brought in there, held captive as sex slaves from ISIS, that has destroyed their homes, destroyed their country, and so on. So you have these networks all the way up into Afghanistan, terror networks. You have Hamas jihadists who have been tracked back all the way to training bases in the new Al Qaeda headquarters, also formerly known as Camp Leatherback, in the Helmand province in Afghanistan. So essentially, US bases that have been abandoned because the US military pulled out abruptly back, for those who remember, just a few years ago when the US pulled out under this wonderful US administration, thinking that this is the solution and leaving an absolute vacuum, and not just leaving a vacuum, but actually funneling billions of dollars yearly towards these terrorist groups. And basically, again, terrorist enablers, like I'm pointing out. This is what I'm seeing the West is doing. Again, in the comment section, please feel free to correct me. If you think I'm wrong, I'll be happy to see. But don't just throw propaganda at me. Give me facts. Give me proof. What I'm quoting you right now, these are facts. These are proofs that are well documented and known facts. And this isn't, by the way, Israeli propaganda media. This is the Western media that I have gleaned this information from, by the way, on open source. So it's not Intel, it's not Israeli Zionist propaganda. This is Western um, um, journalists who are trying to make the public aware of, like, holy smokes, what's going on over here, right? So this is what they saw. This is what they witnessed. Um, the other thing that is interesting is that that Palestinian militant group of Hamas, um, they they are actually using, like I said, these underground tunnel networks, which has also been documented, to channel in um, financial support by basically money laundering, because of sanctions and so on that prevent them, should and supposed to prevent them from being armed and promoting terrorism. They get it anyways. And the international community knows this. Those who are funneling billions of dollars to the Palestinian cause in Gaza or in the PA in Judea, Samaria, um, they full well know where the money is going. They know that these terrorists are getting the money and that they're empowering them, and they are fully knowing. And I believe, and these are the ones with the real evil agenda in European countries and in Norway, where I witness this firsthand. They're the ones who are keeping the public in the blind, in the dark, feeding them propaganda, promoting their terrorist enabling activities in order to enable these terrorists to destroy Israel. And in my opinion, the core reason as to the why, it's because these people are anti Semites, they are brutal haters of Jews, and they're the same people who were the ones behind the Nazi movement in Germany and are pushing their agendas, their evil agendas, and they know full well what they're doing. I do not hold them unaccountable for what they have done. I hold them fully accountable for their actions, for their lying to their public, and choosing to put their head in the sand. And in any public debate, not allowing the Israelis to have a platform, to have a back and forth conversation. It's all one sided policies, pro Palestinian, pro Gazan, anti Israel, both in the media and in politics. And this insanity needs to stop. So, thanks to, like I said, my good friend in Norway who hosted me and arranged for these meetings, we were able to break through this embargo of of being able to hear any truth come in, and was able to share on podcasts, on news, TV reporting, to get the word out and to spread this truth. Um, a good friend that I've um, now starting to become to get connected with. When I say good friend, meaning I really share this gentleman's desire to fight against this anti-Semitism. This is a Jewish brother who is in Norway. Instead of running away, instead of shutting his mouth, instead of giving in to bullying, this brave young man started a podcast after October 7th. He's a professional photographer. That's his talent. You know, he had nothing to do with Israeli Palestinian conflict before October 7th, just one of your normal Norwegian Jews. And post October 7th, when he saw all the things I just pointed out, his reaction was to start a podcast. His reaction was to invite people like myself who can tell the Norwegian people truly what's happening, and the truth on, from the boots on the ground, so to speak. And I am so proud of this young man. I am so encouraged to see the courage within his heart and the other fellow Norwegians who have had enough of this lying and that are fighting back, and they're starting to make their voices heard. They're starting to fight back this evil. And it's important that people understand. I hope whoever's watching this right now, that you understand that there is a clear battle between good and evil. I mean, clearly, there's no question about it. And one of my good friends, Rabbi Tuli Weiss, um, he pointed this out, and I think it's such a powerful point that he made. Again, he's a rabbi, so they have a gift to be able to share some incredible wisdom with us, and in the most simplest ways. And so he just made a simple observation and said, listen, God has made it extremely clear as to between good and evil. And it is pretty evident on the streets today, if you look around, that there is good out there, and it's being silenced, as I'm pointing out, and there's evil out there, and it's getting a platform, and masses of people are swallowing this the lie of this evil. And so I thought that was a really good observation. That, yeah, that's exactly it. If you can't see the good behind what I'm trying to tell you about Israel, and that we are fighting a righteous war against extremism, against terrorism, against demons, these demonic, soulless um, psychopaths, and that there is evil, and that's what they are. They are clearly evil. And when you have Greta Thunberg, sorry, I can't pronounce her last name. Um, when she is starting to get onto the pro Hamas bandwagon and say, this is, for freedom, and wearing the kafia, and that was part of more of the insanity that I've been seeing in Europe, is I saw that her going to the streets and making these protests, that this is also that the war in Gaza is also a global warming issue. I was like, wow, okay, interesting. Um, and promoting Hamas, promoting the terrorists, and standing against those who are fighting darkness, insane. This is a young girl that I think is really, unfortunately, clearly has some mental issues, and I believe it's also been documented and publicized, and that she's been used as a puppet for all of these extremists. So I kind of have sympathy for this young girl, who's no longer that young anymore, but when she started her activism at, like, what, 15, 16, and became very famous internationally. Um, you're now in your 20s, and apparently your brain is still not fully developed, and apparently you still suffer from serious mental issues. Instead of people being held accountable for misusing this young girl and her clear mental problems, instead of basically going, hey, you shouldn't speak on any public event, you shouldn't go to any of these protests, because it just makes you look really bad, and you obviously can't perceive reality the way reality really is. Instead, they give her a platform, they hold her up, they use her. And to me, that's pretty disgusting. Using this young girl who is clearly lost, a lost soul, who is wanting to fight injustice in this world. And instead, she's being used as a pawn. And that is a shame and a tragedy. And there's many, many like her all over. I'm seeing in Europe, there's many like her that are just blind and want a cause to fight. They want to get behind some justice cause, and unfortunately, they're being the channeling of their energies are being channeled against Israel and the Jewish state, and essentially, like I said, empowering terrorists. So hopefully, if anything that you got out of this whole podcast right now, this episode, is that at least you can be safe and assured to know that, as the my good friend Rabbi Tuli Weiss words said, that, and again I'm paraphrasing, that God has made it very, very explicitly clear what is evil, what is good, and it is obvious. And all you have to do is to open your eyes. Open your eyes. Ask yourself the question, if all I'm hearing is this one-sided narrative and I don't get to hear the other side at all, maybe I'm being lied to. Maybe I'm being fed misinformation. Question, guys. Question what comes to you. Don't be the useful idiots that I've seen in Europe running around with these flags that have nothing to do with them, with their heritage, their people, anything. Quit enabling these terrorists. Quit giving them a safe haven in your countries. It's about time you get rid of them. It's about time that you send them right back to where they came from, where they can promote all that junk there and leave you alone. Leave Israel alone. We don't want that here, and I hope you don't want that in Europe either. Europe is suffering with this evil, and it's very clear and very obvious. And if it's not obvious to you, not clear to you by now, you really need to wake up. You really need to wake up. In closing, I think it's important that we stop allowing these propagandists to terrorize, to humiliate the Jewish people who have been through the worst atrocities since the Holocaust. They need to be held accountable for claiming and belittling the suffering and saying that we are blowing it out of proportion what happened to us on October 7th, that we're the ones who are the oppressors, and that these prisoners simply want to break free from their prison, which is what the October 7th attack was interpreted by some. They just wanted to break out, which is exactly why they broke out and came back in. I don't know any prison where people break out of it and they come back into it willingly. Again, don't question the logic behind some of these ideas, right? That's the only way these things can be promoted, this propaganda, is that people just don't question the logic, simple logic of these claims. And how come is it that, just imagine, put yourself in our shoes and feel how I feel when I'm sitting there watching these people claim that these women who had been raped and tortured, that they're just lying. When was the last time you witnessed a rape victim that gets called up to give an account in a jury, right, against the rapist, and that the rape victim is the one that is being humiliated, is being accused of causing the rapist to commit the rape, and that it's all their fault, and then sympathizing with the rapist and saying, no, it's okay, we're sorry, we understand. It must have been really difficult for you not to do that rape. It must have been really difficult for you not to behead those babies. It must have been really difficult for you not to burn people alive. Really difficult. We understand. We sympathize with you because that's what you're doing. So imagine how we feel, the victims of this horrors that have hit us, and that we've been carrying this trauma for nearly a year now. Some of us waiting for our loved ones to get back, hoping they're still alive, held in captivity. And most of us wanting to just return to our lives as normally as possible, that is. Because our life will never be normal again. Never again are we going to go back to any type of normalcy completely. We will carry the scars and the traumas of these horrors that have happened to us for years to come. And yes, also, unfortunately, so will the Gazans, who have had to live through this hell, while Israel's had to retaliate against the evil that hides amongst them. In fact, that's another thing that people aren't pointing out. If the people of Gaza who are begging for Hamas to end the war with Israel are not being voiced. In other words, if you're not listening to them saying Hamas needs to stop, then you're missing the big point. You're missing the big picture. Instead, you're giving a voice for Hamas and not the Gazans who are sick and tired of Hamas, holding them captive, not Israel, a terror group. Not the Lebanese are the problem. Hezbollah is the problem. And not either one of those groups is the problem, but Iran is the one who is the enablers. They're the ones who give the finances. They're the ones who are pushing very strongly from afar to use these proxies against Israel because these tyrannical psychopaths are insane and they envision a future where there is no Israel. Well, first of all, they're wrong. That's not going to happen. And God is going to have the final word, not them, not their will. And anybody who's studied history, and I encourage you, go ahead and study the history of the Jewish people, of the Israelite nation. No nation that has ever opposed us and tried to eradicate us has ever succeeded, ever in the history of the Jewish people, ever. And that's not going to happen. And to me, that's my assurance that I'm fighting on the side of truth, that I'm fighting on the side of righteousness. And therefore, I know, as another, to quote another great rabbi, Rav Lau, he's the head rabbi of Israel at one point, a Holocaust survivor, one of the most amazing people that I can think of in Jewish history. I was just having this talk with my son because he asked me, who is your favorite rabbi, and we were discussing different names. His name came up as being one of my favorites, and I explained why. And he made a very important message to some young soldiers when he had taken the time to give a speech to a group of soldiers. And he said, a people who doesn't know where they come from, they have no clue where they're going. And his encouragement was, make sure you know as a Jew where you come from, where your people come from. What is your history? Where do we come from? Because with that empowerment, you'll know where you're going. And a nation and a people who don't know where they come from, don't know their history, don't know their roots, and or try to erase and forget that, they have no future. That's what's happening, I see, in Europe. And that's what I told them. I said, you guys have the cross in your flags. This is your heritage. To turn your backs on God and your Christian heritage, and instead to promote humanism and Marxism and all this insanity. Same in the United States. Let's do away with the founding fathers, right? Let's do away with what they inscribed as should be the founding principles of this nation and rules and laws that if we abide by them, they will protect you. Let's discard it, right? Let's rewrite it. Let's do some edits. That's what is threatening Western civilization. That is what is also threatening the nation of Israel, is when you want to take that same crazy agenda and think that you're going to change us. We are not going to change. We know our history, we know our past, and we know clearly where we're going. And we know that this is the safe haven for Jews in the world. And I couldn't have gotten here any faster to get back home as a Jew and to know this is the safe haven that we're creating for our families and that we're going to uphold, and that you're going to have to come through us in order to take that away from us, because it's going to be good men who are going to stand up and not allow the bullies to destroy us. And for those weak men in society who want to let evil spread, I pity their soul. I pity them. And they have a lot to give an account for. There's going to be a day of judgment. There's going to be a day of reckoning, is what I believe. And we all will be held accountable for what we did, and not just what we did as in good or bad, but also what we didn't do. For those who didn't speak out, for those who, unlike Dietrich Bonhoeffer of Germany, finally had enough, saw where things were going in Germany, and he had the courage as a Christian to stand up against Nazi Germany and say, "You're wrong." Got imprisoned for it, and literally within days before the war was over, Hitler made it his personal request that Dietrich Bonhoeffer be executed. This was a martyr, a hero of Germany that stood up for light, for truth, against darkness. And it's those kind of Christians that we Jews recognize as those that we have a lot in common and are willing to fight shoulder to shoulder for a future for our children, for our nations, for our communities. And I encourage you, be on that side of history. Don't be silent. Don't be silenced by the loud minority. Know that the majority within your culture, within your societies, friends, I guarantee you, when you speak truth into their lives, and you do it boldly, all of a sudden that 50% of Norwegian society that's afraid to speak their truth because they're afraid of, what is being propagated on the media and by these minorities, they're going to be silenced. Speak up for truth. Speak up for righteousness, guys. Now's the time. Now is not the time to be silent. You have elections coming up in the United States. You have elections coming up in different countries in Europe. I know that they're having in Norway. Now is the time to fight back for your civilizations, for your societies, to stand on the side of truth and light. God bless you from Israel. Thank you guys for listening. Shalom.